Yeah.
Imperfection is what actually builds connection. So if you are struggling with building connection with people, I would say really challenge yourself and ask, are you willing to be imperfect and show your flaws? Because that's how you'll truly build connection with others, is by displaying your imperfections instead of hiding them, thinking that those are what make you unlovable, when in reality, your imperfections and your flaws are literally what make people love you, and your quirkiness and your weirdness and sharing those crazy thoughts.
Welcome my guest, Janelle Lynnae. She is a confidence coach, national speaker, author, thought leader, corporate workshop facilitator, and TikTok extraordinaire. She is the founder of The Next Level Confident and the Confidence Workshop. She is a sought-after corporate facilitator and keynote speaker with years of experience in coaching women on how to break through psychological barriers unknowingly placed on self. She assists women in uncovering limiting beliefs, giving concrete tools to building confidence in the workplace, and initiates collaboration with methods proven to build authentic connections and build a network of support in order to take each woman to the next level. Also, she is the best-selling author of the book, Flex Your Confidence Muscle: How to Overcome Your Limiting Beliefs and Finally Take Action. This book is designed to help you slow down, to stop busying yourself with work and your never-ending to-do list, so that you can get honest with yourself about what's holding you back from living your dream life, to give yourself the permission to be the woman you were authentically made to be. Welcome back to another episode on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast. I'm so happy to welcome on Janelle Lynnae. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know we've just had a whole conversation, but let's get rolling and to the actual show. Welcome to.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. Super excited to be here. And for all the listeners joining in, thank you for giving your time today. We're super excited to have you.
Oh, perfect. Well, as I was mentioning, I got the opportunity to read your book, your new baby that you just birthed, that is now available now, Flex Your Confidence Muscle. And it, I loved reading through this book, first of all, for the vulnerability you shared in this book, which I really relate to, number one. And then also there are so many tangible tools that you could take away and access. You provided so many resources that you could either do right then and there or access later. So it's awesome, this book. It's a quick read. So thank you for sharing it with me and preparing for this interview. I just deeply enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to read it. I feel really honored that you took time out of your, I'm sure, insanely busy schedule to actually, read it through and just to hear the vulnerability in it too. I'm excited to hear even like some of the things that you related to, like you were just saying.
Yeah. Well, how about this? So I definitely feel all of our listeners need to know why you're here today and why you even share what you share today, and what brought you to the position to be able to teach this to other women, which is building your confidence and being or feeling worthy. And then also stepping into your fullest potential and believing that you deserve all that you want that is set on your heart. So what brought you to this position? Was it something that you struggled in before, or what gives you the position you are in today to serve this onto others?
Yes. Exactly like you said, it really is just my own journey that led me to doing the work that I do as a confidence coach. So my company is Next Level Confident, and I started it about 4.5 years ago. It first started out half fitness, half mindset, but really as I started to get, it's funny actually. I hired a business coach that is for helping personal trainers start an online fitness business. And I was a personal trainer at a gym. And so I was like, okay, great. I'm going to start my online fitness business. And they asked us to share our transformation story with our audience on Instagram. But before you post it on Instagram, they said, post it on our Facebook group so we can give you feedback. Okay. So all of the students in this course or whatever coaching are posting their transformation story. And all of their transformation stories were all about fitness and like weight loss and, like unhealthy relationship with food and all these things. And I kept trying to think, like, I wrote one out and it was like super inauthentic. I was like, yeah, I worked at a tech company for 2 years and like was doing CrossFit and I got kind of bulky for a little bit there. Like, I was like, and then I became a personal trainer and lost a little bit of weight. And like, it was just so clunky and so inauthentic. And so then I sat there with myself. I remember just being on my bedroom floor and being like, what is my true transformation story? Like, where was I and where am I today? And where am I going? And in that moment, I got really honest with myself. And it was the first time I actually fully was honest with myself about what I had been through in my past, which is, and again, I dive into this like in a lot of detail in my book, but I believed for many years that I was actually going to die in a car accident somewhere in my mid 20s. And I started believing that lie around the age of about 13 or 14. And I've done a lot of digging to try to figure out like, where did this come from? How did I really start believing this? And I have a lot of different theories around how that came to be. But a lot of it was honestly my own insecurities and feeling like I don't matter that much. And I would get like an ego boost off of picturing myself. And this is so morbid, you guys. So, trigger warning for sure. I would picture myself dying in the car accident. And then I would picture everyone crying about me at the funeral and being like, Janelle was just so awesome. We loved her so much. And like all the popular girls that were, kind of not including me on a lot of things because I was kind of on the fringe. Like, I'm almost a popular girl, but not quite cool enough. And I would picture them telling my parents, like, yeah, we were like best friends with Janelle. She was so awesome. And my parents and I really butt heads a lot at that time in my teenage years. And so like I picture my parents being like, we just wish we weren't so strict with our daughter and all these things. And so it's kind of like my way of like almost like visualizing getting back at people for not treating me well enough. And so it was a very interesting mindset because it was honestly, the way I look at it is it's like the ultimate victim mindset of like, my life doesn't really matter that much. I deserve to die in this car accident. Oh, and all the people who haven't been like nice enough to me, they'll pay or something like that. I don't know. It's so wild. And so all that goes to say is I used to visualize myself dying in the car accident and the funeral all the time. Like I would picture it probably, it's hard to say. I think there were different seasons probably where I was more depressed and had darker seasons. And those I probably would think about it more often, like a couple times a week. And then there were probably seasons where I wouldn't think about it for a couple months. But for whatever reason, I really believe my destiny was to die in this car accident.
Wow.
And so it's a wild story. And I know probably like at least half the listeners right now have never even heard of something this wild and crazy. And so, don't worry. It's not, this whole podcast isn't just going to be about that. But what I will say is the more I've shared this on podcasts and speaking engagements for companies and all these things, the more I've actually found out that a lot of people have had not always the exact same thought pattern, but similar thought patterns of like, what would happen if I die? And, kind of like fears around death and sometimes even like thinking it's like their destiny to die young. And sometimes it's because like I've heard so many stories now because I share this. And so many people have reached out to me and shared their version of the story, whether that be cancer or think they're going to get cancer and die young or whatever it might be, lots of different stories. And obviously I pray that everyone, I don't ever want anyone to think any thoughts like this, but I do want to say if anyone listening right now has ever had these types of dark and morbid thoughts, first and foremost, I think it's worth saying that you're not alone, that there are lots of people who have these types of thoughts. So you're not weird. You're not crazy. That's what I thought there was something wrong with me because I was like, oh, I'm like so weird for having these thoughts. So I didn't want to tell anyone. Um, so you're not weird and crazy. And then second of all, the most important thing to do is to tell someone because when we keep our lies and our dark thoughts to ourselves, we think that's what's going to provide freedom because we're like, well, no one will know. I'll just keep this to myself. And by actually suppressing it, that's when it ends up getting worse and worse and worse. It like chokes us out like a weed. And so the thing that was the most powerful for me was when I finally, at the age of 22, I told some mentors of mine through my church. And again, I had barely told anyone because when I did tell people, they really freaked out and they were like, don't think that thought. And I'd be like, you're right. I shouldn't think that thought. It's weird. It's crazy. Like I'm a crazy person. Something's wrong with me. Right. And so when I finally brought it to someone who was really safe and trusted, and I told them, hey, I think I'm supposed to die in a car accident soon. And they actually, they both spoke life over me, and they were like, Janelle, this is a lie from darkness. And the truth is that you were created for life. You're created for life to the fullest. And if anything, you actually have a huge calling on your life and a big purpose on your life. And this is something that like darkness is almost trying to like take away from you so you don't live in light. And for me that night after telling them, it was a really powerful experience to be able to walk away from that and be like, I've been believing a lie all these years. And one thing I'll say is because the husband of that couple is a husband and wife, he actually used to believe the same lie. He thought he was going to die young. And he said, do you picture people, at your funeral? Do you picture everyone missing you and all these things? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly how I feel. And he was like, I used to have that too. So again, I think sometimes like when you realize you're not alone in your dark thoughts, or you realize like, you're not a crazy person, then it feels really good to know that like someone else has had those thoughts, and it's a level of freedom that I had never experienced before. And so going back to years later, sitting on my bedroom floor, trying to think of my transformation story, I had never really thought about that story that I just told you. I kind of still suppressed it, to be honest. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, that thing happened, whatever. And I didn't think much of it. But that day I just started bawling my freaking eyes out. And I was like, I used to believe I was going to die for like 8 years. And that was like debilitating. And I never would plan for my future. And I went to college and I picked a random major because I didn't really care what I picked. And I, I would think about how everyone couldn't stand me and that I was annoying. And like, I had so many limiting beliefs, so many insecure thoughts, so low self worth. And I was like, that's like my real story. And so anyway, to make it a little lighter again, I do a transformation story where I share all of this and I post it on the Facebook group for all the coaches to watch. And I'm like crying in the transformation video. I'm like, I used to believe I was going to die. But then I realized my life like matters, that I can do whatever I put my mind to, and that like I'm made for life to the fullest and live my best life. And all the coaches didn't really know what to do with my story
You're
because
like,
they thought I was just they thought I was doing a fitness, like I lost 20 pounds and now like my life's happier. Let's help you lose some weight. But mine was much, much deeper. And so that's honestly very long-winded version, Erica, of answering your question of how I got started on doing this. As I started to realize like I'm not the only person who had, has or had dark, debilitating thoughts. And again, it's not always that dark. Maybe, a lot of you listening probably, again, hopefully cannot relate to that story, but you can relate to negative self-talk. You can relate to thinking like I'm an outsider here, or I'm not smart enough, or everyone else is more successful than me, or what's wrong with me, and having these like beat up sessions in your brain that keep you up at night, where you're just over and over and over again replaying scenarios of like, oh, I could have done that better. Oh, that person thought I was weird. And like, it's debilitating. And when you find freedom and your mind just totally shifts, I just want that for I want it for every human, no matter the gender, but especially for women, because I feel like we are attacked so much in our mindset around what we're capable of.
mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. It's obviously it's very it takes a lot of courage to share like where your mind goes, if you want to say those crazy thoughts, if you want to say. And I remember thinking about or picturing a funeral and who would be
Mhm.
there, and feeling like, oh, I don't know if there'll be anybody there. And that alone was a thought of sadness, and really then starting to look at, okay, like, why do I think nobody would be there? And if that's my thought, then how do I need to show up differently if I feel that there's nobody there
Mm.
loving, like celebrating the life I lived? So that was a
Wow.
different way I thought of it. But thank you for sharing your vulnerability in that. And I do think, like you said, personally, I think being vulnerable and sharing our story is truly what helps us heal, number one, and then also shares your humanness with another human. And I think that's what we
Mm.
all want, is just to feel like we relate, that we fit in, that we could be understood and we could be seen. And I think when we share our story, that is literally opening up the doors and being like, I'm here, I'm ready to show you who I am without questioning if I'm worthy or not, but yet this is just me, and I'm here to show up and be real and connect with
Yeah.
another human. So I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to share your story. And I just encourage really anybody that's listening in, like, the more you could step into revealing more of yourself. I think that vulnerability doesn't have to be with everybody. Not everybody's going to receive your vulnerability. And that's when you really connect with the right people that you will be in alignment with, is when they're able to receive and hear you and understand and also support you in sharing that vulnerability. So,
Wow.
in
So
t-
good. And one thing I want to like pop
yeah,
in and say about that is that there's a limiting belief that it's better to be perfect. And that's why, like with social media and in so many ways, we feel like the more perfect we are, the more lovable we are. That is a limiting belief that so many of us women struggle with, is the more perfect I am, the more lovable I am. And that's actually not the truth. And it feels like the truth. Like for so many women, especially like women I've worked with and coached, I know they believe that so deeply. Is like the more I present myself as awesome, whether that be in my career, presenting during a speaking engagement, or whether that be in my relationships, like the more beautiful I am, the more funny I am, the cooler I am, the more well loved I will become. But the truth is that people actually love quirks. They love imperfection. Like
yeah,
imperfection is what actually builds connection. So if you are struggling with building connection with people, I would say really challenge yourself and ask, are you willing to be imperfect and show your flaws? Because that's how you'll truly build connection with others, is by displaying your imperfections instead of hiding them, thinking that those are what make you unlovable, when in reality, your imperfections and your flaws are literally what make people love you. And your quirkiness and your weirdness and sharing those crazy thoughts, or being like, just like stating the weird things. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm like, sometimes I'll be flexing, a big part of my brand is like flexing the confidence muscle. I'll be speaking for big companies like Cisco or Pinterest or whatever, and I'll flex and I'll like, you'll see like pit stains. And instead of being like
oops.
pretending like I'm like, oh, let me put my arm down here so they don't see. I'm like, and there I am pitting out. Very fun. There's the sweat. Continue on. Like people think that's funny. People relate with it. They connect. Like probably everyone listening right now has had pit stains before in their life, and felt embarrassed by the sweat running down their arms or whatever. And so people connect with your humanness, people connect with your imperfections. So let it out. Like be weird. People love it.
I completely echo that. And I was going to touch on that, is we get so stuck on this idea of showing up perfectly. And I think that's what's so beautiful, is when people just show up as they are, and also to like call it out too. Like, I think that, like you said, with the sweaty armpits, like, oh, if you notice it, like, okay, I got sweat going on, I guess, like, I
Yeah.
think that I think what you said is so powerful. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. Like, the first thing you need to know is you do not need to be perfect. People are going to relate so much more to your imperfections, because all of us
Mm.
are imperfect in some way or another. And like you said, I think that's what builds connection. Perfectly said, and beautifully articulated. So I love that. And also, you mentioned like shining the light on the darkness. I think that so often of course, we don't want to highlight our imperfections. And when we say imperfections, really when it comes down to it, it's just the things that maybe we want to improve about ourselves, that we wish was a certain way, like our expectations of ourselves, or that's
Mm.
put on us by society, right? So
Yeah.
shining our light on our darkness is being able to really get clear what has been holding us down or holding us back from really stepping into our fullest potential. And I know you obviously speak very much about, especially in the book, over half the book is about these limitations. And really,
Hmm.
that's the first thing we need to address, because of these stories that truly are thoughts and these beliefs that we form that aren't necessarily true. Most of the times they are completely false. That's really what's holding us down from stepping into our fullest potential. So can you talk about that a little bit, of these thoughts, these beliefs that we form, and then of course that leads into our actions? And I know you talk about this, if you want to say a mantra that you realize is like the one simple truth that we all need to know. And then too, really, how do we address it?
Yeah. Yeah. So in my book, I talk about different limiting beliefs that I've struggled with and common ones that I've heard in a lot of my clients and from women, through my community on social media and everything. And so some of them are like, I'm not smart enough, or my body is what makes me beautiful, or, I'm an outsider. That was a big one for me, is like never feeling like I truly fit in anywhere. And so for you as the listener, the thing I would encourage you to do, I'm sure most of you have probably heard the term limiting beliefs before. And the most powerful thing you can do is journal them out, because if they're still floating around in your mind, there's nothing tangible about it. And this is hard for me to always put into words, but when your thoughts are floating around, there's no way to actually fully capture them unless you look them dead in the eyes via writing it on paper. So if I could encourage you to do anything after listening to this podcast, it would be sit down, turn on some Enya or some classical music, light a couple candles, turn your phone on do not disturb. I even like to set a timer for myself while I do these types of things, because I know I could be tempted to look at my phone, look at social media, something like that. So set a timer for like 30 minutes and be like, I'm not going to look at my phone, and let myself use my phone for 30 whole minutes. I'm just going to sit here and think, like, what are the limiting beliefs that I have believed? And and what helps also is thinking about, where do they originate from? So throughout my book, what I share is like the stories of where they came from. And the reason I share that is in hopes that you would be able to think back to a time where something came up for you. So what's interesting is, like, with the work that I do, a lot of times women haven't thought of that memory in many, 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 many years. There's often one big memory. Sometimes there's a few, but there's often one big memory that formed a lot of limiting beliefs. So, for example, I had this one client who, she's Indian, and she lived in India, and she was trying to run as the class president. And I think she said she was in like 8th grade or something. And so she went up and did a little like speech thing in front of her whole school to become the class president. And she was running against a different guy who was also Indian, but he was a lighter skinned Indian. And she's like a darker skinned Indian. And as she came off stage, she heard someone say, well, she's not going to get it because she's too dark. And I mean, first of all, that's like such a devastating story. So I can't even like move past that without like almost bursting into tears. Like, I was crying while she was telling me, because I was just like, you know, um, the amount of things that women of color, especially, have to overcome. It's like it breaks my heart in insane ways. Um, and continuing on with the story is that she hadn't thought of that memory like almost her whole life.
Mm.
And when her and I were on that coaching call, I was like, and she was sharing about all of like her inadequacies and like feeling like she's not good enough. Granted, some of that is just the human condition, right? So like some of that's like we all just feel some of that, and that's okay too. We don't need to wrap shame or guilt or anything around that. And there's a lot of times like a moment in history or a moment in time in your history where you had something happen where it made you feel like you weren't enough, and certain beliefs were formed in that moment. And so when you're sitting there with your journal, I would just say, meditate on, were there any times in my childhood or in middle school or anything where I remember being hurt? And it might be such a small moment, because like for some people it might just be, oh, one time my teacher said that I ask a lot of questions. And even though that teacher might not have meant anything bad by it, if you internally heard it as, my teacher thinks I'm dumb because I asked so many questions, then you might have started to repeat that as your narrative, as, I'm not smart enough, I have to ask so many questions to try to keep up. um, and then you start to look for ways to confirm that limiting belief. So you create it in that moment, and then you keep looking for more and more and more ways to confirm it. And so someone else might say a little comment, and they might not mean anything by it, but what you're hearing it as, I'm dumb. And it's kind of like, it's called confirmation bias in psychology. It's kind of like if you go and you test drive a Tesla, and then you're like, oh oh my gosh, I love Teslas. They're so awesome. Then every time you drive, you might see more Teslas. You're like, oh my gosh, there's a Tesla, there's a Tesla, there's a Tesla. And you're like, holy crap, there's so many freaking Teslas out today. Well, there might not be any more Teslas today as there were yesterday, but you are now attuned to looking for Teslas. So the same way it goes is like people might not be making any new comments towards you, but now you're attuned to, do people think I'm stupid? Do people think I'm stupid? And then you're looking to see if anyone's confirming that. And then ultimately we end up attracting those as our results because we're constantly looking for ways to be like, people like they think I'm stupid or they think I'm annoying or whatever your negative self-talk is. So continuing on with the action item, what you want to do after that is you want to find the truth. You want to find the truth of the limiting belief. For the I'm not smart enough. That a good example of what the truth is I'm smart. I'm smart and I was born smart. And everyone has their own unique gifts and strengths. You know, whatever. It could be like, I don't need a high IQ to prove how capable I am. Something like that. And then another example, this is like, I've been asked this a lot at speaking engagements is, well, what if there is some truth to your limiting beliefs? So for example, one woman said one time, like, I'm not as experienced as all of the people on my team at work. And she goes, that's not a limiting belief. Like literally, I have 3 years experience and they all have 10 years experience. They're all older than me. They literally have more experience. That's just a fact, right? So yes, the limiting belief is like, let's dig deeper. What is the limiting belief? The limiting belief there is, I'm not as capable or I'm not as much of an asset to this team because I have less experience. And so the reframe and the truth on that one is, while I might not have as much experience, what I do bring to the table is a fresh set of eyes, new ideas, whatever you kind of have to, and then digging into your own personal strengths too. Like, that's why I love the Strength Finders assessment, knowing your strengths. Like, one of my top strengths is command. And so it's like, I could write there in that moment, like in that truth statement, I should say, you could write some of your strengths. I'm a great communicator. I'm a command. I have great leadership skills. Write some of the things that you do have and ways that you are an asset to the team, instead of thinking that your lack of years of experience is the thing that's taking you away from being a true asset to that team. And so that's what you have to kind of figure out for yourself while you're working through this exercise. And obviously, feel free to DM me on Instagram, or we can link my email below too. But if you're running through this exercise, which again, I beg of you to actually do this exercise, don't just listen to this podcast without doing the exercise. Because if you don't do the work, you're not going to experience the shift just by listening. You have to do it. And so if you're having a hard time thinking, what is the truth of this limiting belief? Because it feels so true that I literally can't even think of what the other version of the truth would be. Reach out. I'd love to help find a more accurate truth statement for you so we can create a new connection in your brain, a new neural pathway. And then you can start to repeat that as your truth. And it's a very powerful exercise. So I would really encourage each one of you to do it.
I love it. Thank you for walking us through that. And actually, I really love that, because I remember going through this process of the limiting beliefs. Like you said, this is something I think anybody should do, because if we keep it just like, we need to bring awareness to anything in our life to actually be able to create a different direction in our life, meaning different choices, different thoughts. So bringing awareness to what those limiting beliefs are, the best way, like you said, is writing them out. So I remember going through this process and I did exactly what you said. I was working with a life coach at this time. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting, what if part of that is true? And I remember thinking the same thing, but the underneath layer of that thought, that's what you have to find. That's like the gold to uncover what's really limiting you. And so I think that's really beautiful to kind of, peel the onion some more. If you think this one limitation, let's peel it some more. Like, where is the root cause, like you said, and then trying to find, where did this stem from? I think it's such a good process. And I think anybody should do this. Like you said, take action and actually like bring more awareness to what are these stories and thoughts. And another thing I want people to, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but when we were talking about story, I think so many of us, and I know myself, for example, we hear people's stories that are really impactful. Like, oh my gosh, that person got hit by a car and then they were in a wheelchair and like this, that, and the other. And so many of us will look at our own story and be like, mine's not, nothing really happened. Like there's not much, I had a pretty good childhood. Like I didn't really,
Yep.
I don't have many traumas. Like, yeah, I experienced this, but I don't think anybody will care. And I really, really encourage you to not get stuck in this cycle of thinking your story is not big enough to share. And I
Wow.
had to do this with my
Mhm.
own self, being like, because I thought the same thing, like, nothing really happened in my childhood. I mean, I did have this, blah, 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 blah. And you'll go into this whole spiral of thought. But I do think everybody's story matters. And there are people that will relate to your story in some way or another. And that is really creating, again, that human connection. And that's really what we want. So I just wanted to kind of circle that back with the story.
Yes.
And then as far as the
Can I say one
limitation,
more thing really
yeah,
fast?
please. Yeah.
I'm like, oh wow, this is my second time interrupting you.
No,
Sorry
that's
about
okay. I
I
love it.
just
Don't worry.
realized I have a free workbook. I'm like, wait, I guess I should tell everyone I have a free workbook that actually walks you through this whole limiting beliefs exercise.
Perfect.
So if you're like sitting here, you're like, oh yeah, I do want to take action, but you want a little bit more guidance, I have a whole workbook that walks you through it. And so we'll link it below, but it's nextlevelconfident.com/workbook. So you can get that for free. It's literally just because I
Thank
want
you.
everyone to do this exercise. And so yeah, you don't have to just be alone in it. You can have a little bit more guidance and support while you work through it.
Thank you so much. And I know your book, like I said, there's so many tangible resources that you link to and connect people to in this book. So, of course, everything will be in the show notes that you provided. So I appreciate that. And so let's move into confidence. That's the real thing, right? Flexing your confidence muscle. And I love talking about, yeah, I love talking about confidence because number one, I think a lot of people, if not everybody, struggle with confidence. And confidence is a muscle. It's not something necessarily that we are just like born with confidence. It's something we have to cultivate in our everyday. And I believe there are certain fast track ways to get there, but it's really something you have to be intentional about. So asking you, what do you feel is true confidence? And what do you feel is, if you want to say, a false sense of confidence? Can you kind
Mm.
of define both those?
Yeah. Ooh, I love that question, Erica. That's a good one. Well, I had a false version of confidence for so many years because
Me
no
too.
one really knew that I wasn't confident. Like, I think actually a lot of people think that if you're extroverted, you're confident. And if you're like introverted, you're not as confident. I think that that's like society makes you think like that, which is a whole other conversation around like people trying to be more extroverted maybe than they actually are because they think that it makes them more confident. But the truth is that there are extroverted people who are confident and there's extroverted people who are not confident and have low self-worth. And there's introverted people who are confident and there's introverted people who are not. So, that's one thing that I always want to tell people because I feel like introverted people reach out to me a lot and they're like, I just want to be more extroverted so I can be more confident. And it's like,
Mm.
well, you don't need to change your DNA and your identity to try to be like someone else. So, high self worth is it's a lot of what we're talking about. It's being really comfortable in who you are and owning your strengths and also owning your flaws. I think about like when I was dating. I'm married now to the man of my dreams, my husband. He's incredible, but it's like in the dating process, I would try to be really open with people and be like, this is what I bring to the table. I have a big personality. I like to talk a lot, and like I'm fun. I'm deep. I like to have a lot of deep conversations. I don't do, like conversation about the weather. They kill me. I can't do those. So like that's what I bring to the table. What I don't bring to the table. I'm not very naturally patient. Can I work on that? Yes. Do I work on it? Yes. But is it my natural DNA? No. And being like wildly nurturing. I'm not trying to sound mean or anything like that to myself. This doesn't feel like this is just true of me. Like when we go on trips, my husband will be like, our dog Denny, she's an Australian Shepherd. She's really cute. He'll be like, don't you wonder how Denny's doing right now at the dog sitters? And I'll be like, no, we're on vacation. Why would I be thinking about our dog? Like, she's fine. She's having fun with other dogs. And then he's like, he has a little bit more of that nurturing side. So I really think it's knowing what you bring to the table and being confident in that and being okay with your flaws too and not being ashamed of like, again, we can work and become better at anything we want to get better at, but I choose to really hone in on my strengths. And instead of always trying to like make all of my weaknesses become my strengths. I don't believe in that. If we have weaknesses, again, like patience. Yes, I do get to constantly be like, be patient, Janelle. It's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I don't beat myself up anymore about the things that I'm not perfect at or the things that I don't bring to the table. So I think that's what true confidence is having this like really deep rooted belief that your life matters and that who you are is enough exactly as you are. And you don't have to be like someone else in order to be popular or lovable or successful or whatever it is. Um, and then I think where it can look false is, again, I mean, if you're like acting like you have it all together in front of other people and you're like smiling and like you're laughing a lot, and I see that kind of stuff a lot, but I actually have gotten to a point because that used to be me. I can like see through the BS and little comments people speak over themselves because our words are so powerful. I can pick up on someone's how they actually view themselves, often based on little comments they make about themselves,
For sure.
that are limiting or like self-deprecating, like little things they say. I'm like, ooh, you actually don't speak very well about yourself. Or if they have to put down other people a lot, that's another really good red flag for me, that they're very insecure if they feel the need to put other people down. That's just like a scarcity mindset. But when you're confident in who you are, you feel so much abundance because you don't feel the need to compete with other people. And I'm not saying I'm like perfect at that. Obviously, there are still moments where I'll see women on social media who are absolutely crushing it, who are, quote unquote, further along than I am. And there is still that moment of like, oh man, like I wish that I was like where they're at. But then the next moment, I'm like, but also, I mean, there's so many things to unpack there, but it's like, I don't really know how their life really is, to be honest. I still wish them well. I hope that it's as successful as they're making it seem. But I don't know for sure how their life is. I don't know how happy they really are or how successful their business might be really
So true.
successful, but we don't know how the inside of them really is. So there's that first and foremost. Just because someone looks like they're really successful doesn't mean they're actually happy and at peace with who they are. Um, and I am. So that's why I'm like, ultimately, if that person has more money or more success, that's, I wouldn't want to trade my happiness and my peace and the life that I have for more money, more success, just because like that's what it would get me. At the same time, we don't want to create a limiting belief here that it is either or. I can either be happy and peaceful or have wild success and be financially free and all these things. I believe in both and that goes back to abundance. Abundance means both and so again, it's like it really comes down to releasing comparison. And I talk about this in my book too, but it's like when you go into a workout class or something like that, if you're instantly looking around the room and trying to be like, okay, I like that girl's bigger than I am, so I'm better, and then that
Hmm.
boosts your ego in that moment. But then you look at this other gal and she's skinnier. I freaking hate the word skinny, skinnier than you are, and it's like, then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, like she's the best, she has the best body in this class. That person is wrestling with insecurity because they're constantly using other people as a measure of their success. And they're looking at someone's body or someone's finances or someone's marriage or someone's house or their car, and they're thinking, like, they're comparing where they are. So if someone has something better, then they suck. If someone has something worse, then they feel really good because they're like, yes, I'm the winner here, right? So if you're playing like win lose with yourself a lot, I would say that you have room to grow in your confidence, because true confidence, you really begin to release the need to compare yourself to other people, and you start to become really proud of exactly who you are and proud of the journey that you are on, instead of thinking you need to be on some other journey.
Beautifully said. Do you believe that we could have a healthy comparison, like instead of letting it diminish us, but yet help us possibly, notice where we could grow? Do you believe there could be a healthy side of comparison? Just out of curiosity,
I
because
think
let's
so. Yeah.
let's be honest,
Yeah.
like we all compare ourselves to others. That's like no matter what we do.
Right. Right.
So do you believe there's a healthy aspect of that?
I think there is a healthy aspect. Yeah. And I think like there are certain people that I look up to, and I guess I don't love the word comparison for it still, just because I'm
Yeah.
not like trying to become her. I'm trying to become my like more the best version of myself. and I see it being on a similar journey to where she might be. But yeah, like there's one gal that I love to follow. Her handle's Rebel Nutrition. Her name's Amy, and she talks about if you feel jealousy towards someone, then maybe that means that it's something that's meant for you too. And so the mindset around that, in what I always teach, is if she can have it, so can I. And
Exactly.
if she can do it, so can I. And so I think you could use it as a way to inspire yourself and
Exactly.
remind yourself that it's possible for you. And that, yeah, like if someone else has what you want, that can't be, it's actually, it should be encouraging to
Shows
you.
you
It
what's
should be,
possible.
it shows you it's possible. Like it should be
Yeah.
awesome to see that and be like, dang, if she can do it, so can I. If she can do it,
Yeah.
so can I. So that's definitely a mantra of mine.
Yeah, I think that is perfect, and that's exactly what I was thinking because I think I used to compare myself to so many other women, especially, and be intimidated by them. But then I started to switch it and always saying like, that just shows me what's possible. Like, what makes if
Yes.
she's able to do it, why can't I? Like, she is not anything different than me. Maybe she has a different journey and she's learned more skills, but can I learn those skills? Yes, I can. So that's why I think
Yeah.
that, like you said, comparison isn't the best choice of word. And I think we could think of another word, but I do think there could be a way to turn it into a healthy, inspiring, and empowering type of
Yes.
thing, opposed to disempowering and letting it shrink you more. So beautifully said.
Totally.
So, what would be
Totally.
some of your, because I know for myself, like I do believe that I could authentically say that I believe I'm a confident woman, but it took me time to get here. And I've learned along the way what helps build my confidence. As we say, confidence is a muscle, it's something we cultivate.
Mm.
So what do you believe are some of, like, if you were to name the top 3 ways to build your confidence, what would be like the first initial things that somebody, because I think that we all have heard the term fake it till you make it. And I don't know if you believe in this idea. I do believe that the only way to become something is we need to first start. That's just so
Mm.
that could be thought of as fake it till you make it or fake it till you become it, however you want to word it. But what do you feel are like the 3 main ways to cultivate confidence when you feel like you are not, like, you're really, like, let's say you're stepping into a new career and you're like, okay, definitely there's other people that know way more than me and I'm just learning. So how could I start to gain and cultivate confidence before I have it?
Yeah, love it. The first thing I would say is reflection. I really believe that reflection is the most important part to building confidence because, to be honest, like you can listen to podcasts all day and YouTube videos of personal development. And while I love those things, obviously, like we're on a podcast right now, I have a podcast. Like I am all for podcasts and listening to YouTube videos. But when you're constantly letting other people's voices guide you, I think you start to forget how to guide yourself and how
Mm,
to have your own voice. And so I actually think that reflecting is the most powerful. And what that might look like is turning off podcasts sometimes and turning off YouTube videos and motivational whatever and Audible and whatever. It's like get in tune with yourself, get in tune with your own voice, start to listen to your thoughts, start to be aware of how you're thinking, and um, realize that everything that you need is already within you. So there's no need to find it from someone else. Again, great. I love all these things, but it's like if you're I know in the personal development world, I've run into so many people who they so often are going from coach to coach to coach and conference to conference to conference to and podcast, and it's like I saw their life like so stagnant and I'm like you're doing so much but your life isn't really reflecting, like I don't see the results coming in your life. And I think we can see growth based on results, like your external world is a reflection of your internal world. So as you change your internal world, your external world actually should shift and there should be new results in your life because of the change inside of your mind. And so if you're constantly looking to everyone else to change you and you're never looking inside of yourself, I think that that's going to really debilitate you and constantly make everyone else the authority in your life instead of realizing the authority that you have inside of you already and the voice you have inside of you already. So that would be the first thing I would say is spending time in reflection. And just, again, the practical thing of that could be journaling more, or, and people always say, well, what should I journal about? It's like, start with just writing how your day's been. It's so
Mm-hmm.
basic,
How
but
you're
it's like
feeling.
how you're feeling. Yeah. Like, I went to
Yeah.
work today and I was kind of anxious when I got there because I got up too late and blah, blah, blah. And then I got there and, you could just write out some of the things that happened during your day. So you're starting to learn how to process your day, like who came up to you, who did what. And then you can, yeah, to your point, Erica, like how you're feeling. Like, I felt anxious in that moment. Oh, but my favorite part of the day was this. And I really felt like I was in flow when I did this. And this brought me a lot of joy when I did this. Start to become aware of how you're feeling and how you're actually doing and what your thoughts are. And then the next thing I would say, number two, is, gosh, this one I know is overplayed probably, but morning routine changed my life.
Absolutely.
Having a morning routine, like where I don't look at my phone, one of my biggest non negotiables is not looking at my phone for the first 30 minutes to 1 hour of every single day. I have all notifications turned off on my phone, other than I have a birthday app called Hip so that I know when people's birthdays are, because I get so sad when I forget people's birthdays. But I have literally, so many people are mind blown by this, but one of my biggest tips is turn off all notifications. Like, I don't get a notification for a text, for any social media platform, emails, nothing. I don't get any notification. The only way that my phone will light up, it's sitting right next to me, is if I get a phone call or if it's someone's birthday notification. Those are the only things that will light up my phone. And I love that because it allows me to be fully present when I'm with people, and I can have the
Yeah.
phone sitting there. I stopped wearing my Apple Watch actually like a couple months ago because I started thinking about how addicted I was to like checking the calories and all these things. But even when I had an Apple Watch, I would never turn on any notifications for messages, phone calls, nothing. Like, I live a notification free life on all of my technology. And that really helps me to be able to be present in every moment that I'm in. So I guess that was kind of a side, but because of that, I'm able to wake up in the morning, turn off the alarm on my phone, but not see any notifications of like who texted me, and living in a fight or flight way where I'm constantly just like looking at my phone and thinking like I need to scroll on TikTok to start my day. Like, no, thank you. I want to be in tune with my thoughts, how I'm feeling. Like, look at my vision board first thing in the morning, write down things I'm grateful for, drink a slow cup of, I don't drink coffee anymore actually, but slow cup of chai on my patio, like listen to the birds. Like, that is what I believe the first hour of every morning should be. And that's part of romanticizing your life. Like, there's, like the whole movement on TikTok of like romanticize your life. And I think the morning routine is the first thing that really helped me actually start to romanticize my life, get clear on my vision by looking at my vision board or writing out things that I was, believing for in my vision. So yeah, morning routine changed my life. So I have to say that one, because I used to wake up and roll out of bed and be like getting to work all frantic and anxious and everything like that. And it just set the tone for the rest of my day. And now I just feel like so peaceful to start my day because of my morning routine. Um, and that plays in peace and confidence, I guess, to close that loop. Peace and confidence goes so much hand in hand, because
Mm,
when you feel peaceful and you feel calm, you're able to go into situations with a level of confidence that the person who's like scurrying around and has this like anxious energy, they aren't able to lead and think clearly the way that someone with confidence and with peace and
true.
clarity is able to lead. And then the third thing, let's see, there's so much to
There's
choose
so
from
much,
here.
right?
I know there's so much. I do think, like, I will say, like, I do love listening to podcasts and listening to audibles, and following. I'm pretty, especially I'll say on TikTok, because I'm on TikTok like all the time now, more than Instagram. But like, following and being around people who really are the best versions of themselves. So I'm the sum of the five people I hang around the most. So starting to get around people who are also pursuing their dreams and who are also speaking well about themselves. I think leaving behind friends from the past, that could be a whole freaking podcast in and of itself, because my friends and I talk about that a lot, of like old friendships that we had that like we still love the person, and it's really painful to like kind of distance yourself a bit from them when they're like their life really isn't in alignment with where your life is going. And I don't mean just like they had a couple bad days and you're like, bye, I gotta ditch out my friend. I'm not saying like don't be loyal to your friends, but I am saying that if you have a friend who's repetitiously very negative, or is constantly bringing you down and making you feel bad about yourself, and it's like happening for months and months on end, and it's just like they're just a negative human being, unfortunately, even if you love them so much, and maybe you've tried to tell them and they aren't receptive to that feedback, you got to be able to leave behind people. And so I think that, like, actually, you know what, this is, I'll say, I'm doing a lot here. It's more than three, but
That's
the people you hang around, and that goes hand in hand with being able to leave behind good for great. And that's going to happen with your friends. That's going to happen with your career. That's going to happen with um, dating relationships, whatever. Like, there are so many ways in your life that you probably are settling in mediocre. And as you start to let the mediocre things go, you're going to start to see your self-worth higher, because you're realizing what you're worth, and you're realizing you don't have to settle into these mediocre friendships or mediocre relationships or mediocre career or mediocre finances. Like, no area of your life has to be mediocre, because miracles are available to every single person on the planet. And so it's up to you to start believing that miracles are possible, and yeah, leaving behind good for great.
I love that. And I think that when you start to, anybody that's in this personal growth, you'll start to notice this. You'll start to become more aware of the things that are holding you down, and then the things that are making you rise, if you want to say, like pushing
Mm,
you forward. So I do think that your environment, when you talk about your morning routine and also your friendships, your relationships, when you're able to access this and really just become more clear of what's in alignment that with where you want to go, then you will start, looking at certain friendships like maybe this is just not serving me in my growth, and maybe I have to create some distance. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to end the friendship. It's just more
right.
manage your time around where, because our time is so precious. And I know for me, I'm in this big stage of growth right now. And so I'm very much trying to strengthen and cultivate the relationships that are in alignment where I see myself to go. And it's also just where I'm at right now in our life. And I think we go through these shifts. So I think we should be able to bring more awareness to, our environment. And that goes with our friendships and relationships. And I wanted to
Yeah.
add to that, just to kind of wrap up this confidence. I realized we were talking so much before we pressed record, and I have to head off to another interview. So I'm so sad that I have so much to pull out of you, because there was so much goodness I got out of this book. There's so much you talk about of really building our confidence and really, pulling out those limitations that hold us back. But I wanted to add to the confidence, because I posted about this yesterday actually. And one of the ways I believe that you could fast track your confidence is really keeping your word. Most importantly to yourself, but also to
Mm,
others. So I believe when you say you're going to do something, that you follow through, and that will just stack up, and you'll build your confidence in your everyday just by keeping your word. Because when you're keeping your word, especially yourself, let's say it be, I'm going to work out tomorrow. I'm going to do an hour hike. Like tomorrow is the day I hike, and then you wake up in the morning, let's say you're really not feeling it, you're tired, you're like, forget about it. I'm sore, whatever. But if you said you're going to do it, you do it. And then after you finish, you're like,
mm,
I'm so happy I stayed committed. And that's like a win, like celebrating your
wow.
small wins. So I believe that is one of the number one ways to build confidence in your everyday is just keeping your word. It's definitely, not only as respect to other people, but also respect to yourself. And so that will just
Wow.
stack it. And I think as far as habits and rituals, again, like establishing those things that are going to help you win your day by doing your morning routine, it's like that just will stack, and build your confidence. So I just wanted to add that in because I think that's
I
really
love
important.
that. It's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like I said, you talk about so much in this book. And one of the things I remember at the end of the book, you were talking about certain things we should remove from our vocabulary. And so, just to wrap this up, because I thought this was really powerful, because I think so many of us don't realize what we like speak into the world and how that shows up as either a lack of confidence, or you're also like smashing your confidence in a way, the way you speak. And so I do think there's a way we should reframe our vocabulary. And like one of the things I know you talk about is, and I try to do this as well, so very often we say, I have to do this. But when we say,
Mm,
I get to do this, like just that, you could see the energy switch in those words. So what was some of the things that you stated in the book that you feel we should remove from our vocabulary? Like what were some of those things you mentioned?
yeah. So I think that you're talking about the part where it's like the four sentences that instantly make you seem less confident, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of those sentences is using the word just. And especially like if you're following up, I know a lot of people will write emails and be like, just want to follow up on this. And just is a minimizing word that makes you seem smaller. And it's almost like you're apologizing for the follow up or apologizing for what you're doing. And so the first one, I would just say, start to pay attention to how often you're using the word just, because women will use that word a lot more than men around just wanted to check in on this, just wanted
Yeah.
to see this. And you can tell even when I say it with my voice, it's like my voice even goes like a pitch or two higher because it's like not as confident. It's like just wanted to see, I just anyway, so that's a really big one. Another one is saying, does that make sense on a regular basis? So I actually had a TikTok go super viral about these sentences. And a lot of people fought me on this one because they were like, I'm a teacher, so it makes sense for me to say to my students, does that make sense? And while I do think there's a time and a place to check in, especially if you are a teacher or if you're training and you are, trying to pay attention to the student and seeing if they are understanding the information you're giving, you might say something along the lines of, does that make sense? Although a more powerful way to say that even would be, do you need me to clarify anything?
Mm.
But if you're not in that situation and you're in a meeting and let's say you're with a bunch of higher ups or managers or you're selling your idea, if you tell your idea and then you end it with, does that make sense? You're immediately making it seem like you don't trust your own ideas. And that's something that then people will see you the way you see yourself. So if you're not trusting your ideas, they're not going to trust your
True.
ideas. And there's been times where I've been talking to women in a phone call and they'll say, does that make sense? Like 10 times. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And this is why we're on a coaching call right now because you keep saying, does that make sense? Because you're not trusting anything you're saying. And the saddest part is like a lot of the people who do that are the ones who are great communicators, wonderful at articulating their ideas, yet they just don't trust their own voice. So every single time, I'm like, yes, that made sense. Yes, that made sense. Yep, it made perfect sense. Exactly how you said it because you said it wonderfully. And so it's just having that confidence of believing that the way that you said it, it did make sense. And if people have clarifying questions, they can ask, or
Mm-hmm.
you can follow up at the end and just say, "Is there anything I can clarify? Is there anything I can clarify to make this easier for you to understand?" Something along those lines. Um, and one more on that list, I know there's like four total, but I'll just say one more
Yeah.
is volunteering for things. Something that women do a lot of is they volunteer for, um, being the note taker in a meeting or sending the calendar invite after the meeting or, I don't know. So for this, it's, the sentence was, I can take care of that. And instead of always being the one to volunteer to take care of things, I know you're trying to be helpful. I know you're trying to be a team player, and that's good. But there's a time and a place to actually not constantly take that beta position and constantly taking the notes and constant whatever that looks like for you, like taking a subordinate activity because you feel like that's what you're worth. Instead, I would encourage you to delegate it to someone else or simply just don't raise your hand for that and wait for someone new to do it. Even if you're used to being the person who always does it, you get to learn how to keep your mouth shut and not volunteer yourself for everything because you can't always be the volunteer. Now, I
Yeah.
know that doesn't apply to everyone listening. Like there might be some of you who never volunteer because it all comes back to different personality types. So if you're the personality type that like never volunteers and you're not as naturally like helpful or whatever, that's the person that needs, you get to learn how to throw in your hat and or throw in the hat maybe isn't, but like do the thing that maybe is less desirable. But if you're the person who is always the helper, you're always the person volunteering and making sure everyone's comfortable and it's kind of a people pleasing tendency, that's the person I would really encourage to step back and let other people take the reins.
So valuable. I think all the three things you shared is so, so valuable. So let's just wrap this up. Where could people best find you? And of course, I'll include this all in the show notes, but anybody that's listening on YouTube, where could people best find you?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I'm on TikTok like all the time lately. It's my jam. So TikTok is at Janelle_Lynnae. And then same with Instagram. I'm on there all the time. And then my website is nextlevelconfident.com. And so, if you work for an organization that brings in outside speakers, like for your employee resource group, et cetera, I speak for a lot of those types of groups for sales kickoffs or just Women's History Month in March. I speak for a lot of organizations, so you can always bring me in to come speak for your company. And if you'd like to email me directly, my email is my first name, Janelle, at nextlevelconfident.com. And yeah, I think that those are the main
Amazing.
places to find me.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. So, I always ask my guests a closing question, and that is if you were to leave a piece of wisdom that you feel you've learned in your lifetime, a life lesson that you just feel everybody needs to hear right now, man or woman, what would that piece of wisdom be?
Hmm. Okay, I actually wrote something down right before this podcast where I felt like my pen was just like moving really quickly. And I was like, I think I
Amazing.
need to share this on the podcast. So I'm actually just going to read it because I feel like it's perfect for this question.
Perfect.
So, confidence doesn't mean fearless, it means you acknowledge the fear and do it anyway. Stop expecting yourself to become fearless. If you are constantly leveling up, then some level of fear and uncomfort is inevitable. If you keep waiting for fearless to happen before you take action, you'll never do the thing. Stop feeling shame around your fear and embrace it. Go take action, flex your confidence muscle.
Oh, so perfectly said. I love it. I love it. And that's the thing, courage is not absent of fear. It's having fear, but doing it anyways. And I think that's such a powerful message that I think really people need to lean into is like how, we have to learn to be more courageous. Basically, like,
Mm-hmm.
keep stepping in the
Yep.
deep end, keep stepping forward, and I think that's, if I were to add another way to build your confidence is saying yes. Just keep saying yes to the things that are gonna drive you forward in your personal evolution, whatever is going to drive you forward. Say yes to that, even when you're not ready, just step forward and do it anyways, so beautifully
Yes,
said, I love it so much.
100%. I know if someone is like, whatever, you're like fearless, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I always like laugh because I'm like,
Yeah.
you think the first time I did a podcast that I felt fearless? No, I was like
No,
shaking my boots. You think the first time that I started speaking for like Fortune 500 companies that I was fearless? No, I was shaking. I'm like,
exactly.
that's
Exactly.
normal. Let's just
Yeah.
normalize the fear. And it's okay to feel fear. It's totally normal. It's okay. That doesn't mean you're not confident. It just means you're a human.
Exactly, and we're all in the classroom together learning along the way, right? So just might as well just step into the space, right? So I hear you
Exactly.
loud and clear. This has been such an honor, Janelle. So great connecting with you and sharing this space with you. So much value in this episode, so much value in your book. Everybody go grab it. It will be in the show notes. It was so great speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. You're a rock star, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.